أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشرف الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم إنا نبرأ إليك من حولنا وقوتنا وعلمنا وعملنا، ونلتجئ إلى حولك وقوتك وفضلك يا ذا القوة المتين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم افتح على أسماعنا وأبصارنا وأفئدتنا وعقولنا فتحا يليق بجودك وكرمك وفضلك يا أرحم الراحمين. وبعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
So we're still talking about the topic of Zakah.
Yep.
Trying to answer one question, right? That is, why is Zakah considered one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the Arkan of Islam, or why is it the 3rd pillar of Islam, right? So who can summarize to us what we've discussed so far?
We spoke about the linguistic definition of zakah, or the 3 meanings of zakah.
Right?
Yep.
Yes.
So we spoke about the praise, the purification, right? And we spoke about the growth. I think we spent enough time on that, inshallah, alhamdulillah, last lecture. So yeah, I advise people who did not attend or just go back, because alhamdulillah, we spent enough time going at depth with these things. Now, we also finished the growth part, right?
Yes.
And we showed how it's going to result in growth. And that's by taking it, by giving it, spinning it to people. But we started talking about the different channels of spending it, right? This is where we ended last topic, and this is what is going to manifest today. That the way money is spent, or the zakah is spent in, according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's not just random, it's something very sophisticated, and would also result in what we call growth, and would result in higher dollar value for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So we started giving you an example what we want to undo from everyone's mind. So we told you that everyone writes when people want to give their zakah. I think this is where we stopped last time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about making spending.
So this is what's in your minds, right? ISH gets $50, give it to orphans, right? And it has to be Ramadan. And then, give $100 to some Life USA to spend in Africa or something, right? This is the exact wrong thing to do with the zakah. So today, inshallah, we're going to learn how is zakah spent in Islam, right? Or what's the right methodology. And again, we're going to wipe this off, inshallah, completely. This is not exactly wrong, but it's not the optimal way. Since we wrote an ISGH on that check. So, tawbah, right? Spelled out 8 different categories.
Yeah.
What we call masarif al-zakah, the channels for dispersing the money of the zakah. So money goes in from those who are capable, and money goes out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we said للفقراء إنما الصدقات للفقراء, that's for people, والمساكين, the needy, والعاملين عليها, the workers, والمؤلفة قلوبهم, basically those يعني soft Islam, those who try to entice their hearts to Islam. Okay? This is number 6 here. وفي الرقاب, basically slaves and captives. والغارمين, basically debt. وفي سبيل الله, basically we said that's jihad for fi sabilillah. And the last one, وابن السبيل, travelers. Okay? And we started talking about the poor and the needy, right? So this is what in the Arabic language called fuqara, and this is the masakin. So what's the difference between a faqir and a miskin?
It's one of those words that when it's put separately, it means pretty much the same thing.
That's right, that's a good introduction. But what do they mean?
But when
So when they're combined,
they're separate.
they're separate, they're different. And when they're separate, they're the same. Right?
Mhm.
This is one of the unique aspects of
So-
the Arabic language. But what do they truly mean?
Maybe somebody that's poor has they don't have the basic necessities. You know, they might not have a roof over their head, might not have clothes.
So
or
what are the
food.
basic necessities? That's a good word actually to start with. Needs and necessities. What are they?
House, roof.
Food. That's what you start with, right? Next.
Yeah, clothing.
Clothing. Shelter. Anything else?
And transport, you gonna need or no?
Healthcare.
Canadian.
Some people consider healthcare actually for those who need it, because some people may not need it, right? If you're healthy, you don't need it. But if you're sick and you're on certain medications, and if you don't take it to die, you die, that becomes a necessity. So healthcare. And some scholars added marriage actually. There you go. I'm not going to tell you which madhab so you don't convert. So these are the basic necessities that Sharia looks at. Okay, specifically, the first 3 ones are common, right, to all human beings. Whether you're healthy or not healthy, you have to eat, and you have to have a shelter, and you have to dress. Right? The bottom 2 ones, kind of maybe not. So they said the faqir, and in Arabic language, for those who speak Arabic, where does faqir come from, brother Yaman? Faqir is from faqara, and what does faqar means in Arabic? Your spine, right? So faqir is like as if his spine broken, meaning like kind of put down to earth because of that. Because basically has no means, no money to meet any of his necessities. And what that really means that barely or does not meet any of these necessities. So if the average income to meet these requirements, let's say, what, $2,500 a month, he's not even halfway there. It's like maybe 300, 400. So that's the faqir, basically out of it completely, right? So if you want to, for simplicity, go on a scale, basically. So these are the requirements. 100% med, 0% med. So if you're at a 50%, below 50, that is faqir. Above 50, that is miskin. So what is the miskin? The miskin is almost meeting those requirements, but not exactly there. 1 month he's there, next month falling behind a little bit. Living one paycheck to the other, right? Struggling to make ends meet. This is exactly what the miskin is, right? And as I told you before, my Sheikh used to say, like, faqir if you don't have a job, miskin if you're a government employee. But now the question is, why didn't Allah just lump them in one group and make just those who are needy, those who are less than 100%? That's a miskin, right? Why didn't He just say, and those who are in need, regardless whether below 50% or whether they're above 50%?
Distribution wouldn't be fair.
There is still,
Set the priority?
right? But you don't have to. I mean, priorities set anyway when you know someone who's having only 300 and someone's 900. The priority is going to be to the one who's 300. Before we answer that question, some scholars did flip the meaning, by the way. This is, for example, in Shafi'i, the definition I gave you. The Hanafi reversed them completely, which it doesn't matter at the end. There is a fuqara and there is masakin. So let's give you some examples. Someone asked, if someone doesn't have a car, for example, can you pay for their zakah? Or give them zakah so they can buy a car?
You should be able to.
Yes.
If you have a job,
It depends, exactly. Whereas the car is not necessary for someone who's living downtown in an apartment and they walk to their job next door or across the street, as someone who lives in Pearland and has to commute to the airport to work. The car becomes a necessity, right? And yes, that person may have enough for shelter, for food, for clothing, but that would need a vehicle, right? A method of transportation in order to get him to a job. So that's a miskin, right? He's not a faqir, he's surviving, he's living okay, but he cannot survive enough, right? What are some of the examples of things that could be a need in one time or a place and not in another time?
Healthcare? Yeah.
Not healthcare, that's kind of universal. Some commodities, for example.
A weapon for self-defense.
A what?
A weapon for self-defense.
Wow, he's
That's right.
really thinking paranoid now. Now, I'm going to give you some examples, and this is, I mean, people who grew up in the Middle East know exactly what I'm talking about. Even in this country, a fridge in the 60s was a luxury, actually. It was not considered something necessary, right? I remember going to my grandmother, when I was a little kid. She didn't have a fridge, Then she had a fridge, and it was like, wow, this is something, It was only for wealthy people, actually. Now you cannot survive it. Or later on, 10 years after, because it changed the way they store food, the way they cook. People used to go shopping every day, everything fresh, they cooked every day. And then women got more westernized, and now they only shop once a week and they only cook once a week, right? So they had to store the food, and the fridge became a necessity, right? So whereas you couldn't pay for someone to buy a fridge out of zakah money, now you can, right? Does that make sense? Now you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Same thing for a cell phone. Cell phone 20 years ago was not a necessity. All what you need, just have a phone somewhere, right? But now you cannot survive with a cell phone. Now you give it to kids because it's security. If they get lost, or if they're at school, or in their emergency, they have a method to. You're not getting a cell phone, man. It's like the idea.
It's not a necessity.
Yet.
Right. So it's for work, for a lot of things. The people expect you to be available, right? It was sort of a convenience years ago. Now it becomes a necessity. So someone, let's say they want to hire him for a job. Well, you have to have a phone, right? You can provide him out of the zakah money to buy a phone, right? So basically, the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made these two distinct categories, because poor is poor. From the beginning of time till the end of time is not going to change. But the miskeen part is variable, actually. It's variable from one area to another, from one time to another, one generation to another. And Allah made sure that He allowed that to that miskeen. Based on these variations, variable commodities, variable times, and variable circumstances. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not just one. And He made sure sometimes the redundancy to emphasize it and said, like, it's not left out. Right? So that made you think, okay, what else could be there? What are the variations? So these are the variations from time to time, from place to place, from generation to generation. And what could be a necessity over here or a need in this country may not be in another country. Right? So these are the things what we're talking about. Then we talked about the zakah, the workers, because in Islam, it's not something you just write a check individually. It's an organization, actually, with workers, with database, who has the money. We survey, just like the IRS, actually, and I call it, for zakah, you need a ZRS. It's true. So you need a zakah revenue service. You need basically to survey people's assets, know who has what, and what are they obliged to give zakah. And then you need to send them statements and collect zakah. And you need to have all the infrastructure and the logistics necessary to run that organization. And how is that organization run? From the zakah money, right?
Oh, okay.
Right. So you hire people, you buy you need computers, you need buildings, you need all that stuff. Is ZRS is serviced by the zakah money, and it's maintained as such, right? So a lot of people think, okay, I'm gonna buy. I'm just gonna write my check of that $50. It's not actually supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be under a ZRS, which is an agency within the state, just like the IRS is. Truly, it's exactly the same way, and it's not supposed to be left to people individually. It is a governmental effort as opposed to an individual effort. Okay? And that would go back.
That's the distribution of zakat and the collection
and distribution.
Both.
Both.
Is this how it works in Muslim countries?
This is how it worked.
I worked before. Okay.
Yep. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, even during the time of the Prophet, he had zakah collectors as opposed to tax collectors. Because a lot of people, you know, they don't know where to spend it actually. They don't know where it should be spent best. So you would have a database, how many orphans we have, how many widows we have, how many unemployed we have, how much we're expecting, right? How much we should spend this year, how much we're expecting next year, what's economy doing, okay? So it's very sophisticated, you know, it's not just, okay, you know, I have $1 million, $25,000, it's gonna go out, right?
And the workers is specifically for zakat collecting workers and part of that organization.
Collection and distribution.
Okay.
You know, now with the IRS, you have people who survey people, right? You have people who enter data in the computers. You have people who send letters. You have auditors. Same thing with the zakah. You have data collectors. You have zakah collectors. You have auditors. Zakah auditors actually audit if it's done true or not, and if people are paying or not. And if they're not paying, you penalize them. Right? And the penalty of the zakah actually is worse than the tax penalty. Right? When the Prophet ﷺ, when you don't pay zakah intentionally, the Prophet ﷺ said, you will take it from him and half of his wealth actually. It's very severe punishment. It's not just like we're going to charge him interest. No. It's very severe. فَإِنَّ آخِذُهَا مِنْهُ وَشَطْرَ مَالِهِ. He will take it plus half of his wealth now. So he can never repeat this again. Because all what you're being asked for, that 2.5%, if you're being stingy and disobedient to pay that 2.5%, then we're going to take half of your wealth. So you never go to that mistake again, and no one else can repeat that mistake. Right? So, let me just, we talked about the slaves, the captives, the prisoners of war, whatever. So they are released, so they're now active producers, contributors in the community, right? And that goes back to the growth. You're turning them into workers, into active producers, productive contributors in the community. So we'll talk about the debt, about the travelers, about the jihad in a few minutes. So let's go back to the same first two categories. So we said now we have ZRS, money comes in, money goes out. Okay? So how do we spend this money? You have in your community the ZRS officer or representative for ISGH, for example. You're in charge of the zakah revenue that comes in. How should we distribute it? Just giving you a very general question. The truth of the matter that unlike what people think, okay, here's my zakah money, $50 there, $50 there, $100 here. The Prophet ﷺ summed it up in one word. He said, إِذَا أَعْطَيْتُمْ فَأَغْنُوا. If you give, you have to make that person sufficient. Make him, he said the word wealthy actually. And what that means, self-sufficient. And that really sums it up. And now you're going to answer, we're trying to answer how would zakah support economy, right? Remember when we said, because our bottom line, people care about money. So how is that going to affect money? And I'm going to give you two examples. And these examples are real, actually. They're not just random. And I'm going to show you practically how you would convert someone from a needy person, a miskin, or maybe a faqir. In 1 year, they become actually zakah payers. Okay? So, I'm going to give you an example of Mr. Abdul, who works in New York City as a taxi driver. and he works for Mr. Goldstein. or Imran or something. Right? So how is Mr. Abdul paid? He's paid monthly. Let's say he gets 5K. Well, Mr. Abdul, of course, has 7 kids. So, so he's paying like about 3K for housing, he's barely making it. Okay? And every month, can I get like $500 loan from his brother? And next month it's $1,000 loan. So he pays his sister the $500, and then it keeps going endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
So how we solve this problem? Say, Mr. Abdul, here's your 25K in Zakah. And what you gonna do with it now? You're not going just to live off that 25K. We don't give him that money actually. We're gonna buy him a car. And he's gonna be a business owner now. Right? And now he's making extra, these examples are real. Now not only he's making money, he's saving money. At the end of the year, he's reaching the nisab, and next year he's paying zakah. Right? Does that make sense? And this is what happens. This is what Islam wants you to do, basically. This is ZRS. These are individuals paying zakah. Right? Zakah is given to these people, right? These people move up in the social ladder. In 1 year, next year they're here, and they're paying zakah, and it goes on to someone else, right? And this is how you elevate the social economic status for everyone. This is why zakah is growth, right? There is more money now. There is more. What's happening that the GDP is elevated on a national level now, especially when you have an organization as a ZRS, right? And the cycle goes on. Mr. Abdul took the money. He's self-sufficient. Next year he's paying zakah. And the cycle goes on and on. You're just elevating one person after another.
So you're not just throwing cash at the problem so that they burn through it. But
exactly.
You're giving them resources.
Exactly.
For growth to be exponential.
And this is the brilliant way of Islam solving the problem of poverty in the community. You're asking for how much? $750 a month to borrow from your sister? Times 12, that's what? At $10,000? Here's a check for $10,000, we're going to give it to you. It doesn't work that way. Because all what's going to happen, you're going to give them to your sister. And next month, and these 7 kids will become 9 kids. And you need to solve the problem. I'm going to...
Sorry, question. With this first 2 categories, we spoke about providing them with tangible things such as food and so on. What about do the scholars talk about mental services or counseling, job training, and all those things? Could the ZRS
everything included.
Provide that as well?
Everything included. I'm going to give you even a better example. These are real examples, by the way. Okay. So everyone knows we have orphans, right? We have orphanages in our country. So how are these orphans supported? People pay their zakah.
Orphanage, yeah.
Right? You have an orphanage and you have like these multi-millionaires and they're paying zakah every year, right? And let's suppose then they pay for their schooling, for their needs. But what's going to happen after they graduate from high school? Now you're 18, you're on your own, right? They barely have, enough means to go to college, to get married. I mean, life starts when you graduate from college, from high school, right? I mean, now you're going to have to go to college, you have to get married, you have to start a family. It's never ending. And for someone who lived in an orphanage all their life, what's going to happen, right? So, one of my sheikhs taught us this, actually. So you have an orphanage, okay, and how many kids you have? Let's say 200 kids, right? And let's say we have enough zakah to support them. Well, we're gonna chop off that zakah 20%, or we're gonna ask for more zakah, right? We're gonna build a capital. It could be readily available if you have, depending on what the ZRS has, right? How much reserve they have. But even on a smaller level, we're not going to have these kids just to spend the entire money, okay? We're gonna invest actually in a factory that produces appliances. Could be washers, dryers, fridges. And who's going to be the share owners? Orphans. What's going to happen after a year or 2 or 5 years? These orphans are business owners. They're shareholders in that factory. And what's going to happen? They're not receiving zakah anymore. They become here, they give the zakah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And what is that? That's the growth we are on. These are the zakah recipients. They're not zakah recipients for more than 1 year or 2. They're business owners now. In 1 year, 2 years, let's say 1 year made them self-sufficient. Next year they're paying zakah. And they're throwing dollars back at the ZRS. See how brilliant this system is?
Can you, on behalf of that person that's required zakat, to do that? Or are you obliged to give him the money and have him or her spend that zakat how they wish?
Typically, when you give someone, you make them owners, right? But if they are incapable of spending the money on their own, you just fulfill their needs. And as a custodian, you can actually do whatever you want. If you know that this person is not going to spend the zakah money wisely, you don't give it to him. I know a person was a brother in the community, and people would give him the zakah, right, money, like $1,000, $2,000, just to get by, So his wife actually called us and said, please don't give him any money. Because you know what he's going to do? She's going to go spend it on gadgets. He's going to go buy a new video camera, a MacBook. I'm dead serious. I didn't believe it till I saw it actually with my own eyes. Said, well, now on the money does not go to him. What are your needs? Show us your bills. We'll pay your bills. Ask the wife. The same thing you can do to this person. Because you give someone, this was a very common example in my country. So let's say you allocate a certain fund for a family. Let's say 5,000 pounds, Syrian pounds, right? Well, that, if you give it to the father, the head of the household, well, $1,500 out of the top is going to go for his smoking budget, right? And $3,500 pounds is for all the needs of the wife and the 7 kids.
Right.
So I said, okay, you know what? What are your needs? You need like school supplies? Here's the school supplies, right? In principle, you have to make him owners of the money. But when there's a need, when there's a better service you provide by dictating how the money is spent, this is what you do. Clear?
Yeah, if there's a precedent of them not fulfilling that, then you take care of
Right,
it.
someone smoking. A lot of people ask, okay, how about if someone drinks alcohol? Can you give him zakah? Yes, but if you know he's spending the money on alcohol, you don't give him the zakah. So how do we fix it? We say, okay, go to his wife, tell her what are their needs. Show us your debts, show us your needs, what are your kids are in need for, and this is how it goes.
What about for people who cannot work?
We'll talk about that in a second. Okay? So let's take another third, let's take a third example.
There's actually an organization called Give Well, which
The what?
Is an organization called Give Well, which does research on different charity organizations, and they use their evidence to measure the amount of impact that you're getting for your dollar in terms of life saved. They use different statistics. Recently, there's been an organization, I think it's called Give Directly, and that's what their mechanism has been. It's been highlighted as one of the top models for giving charity. And what it was large cash stimuluses. So they said you could give half the median income of the country to that person, to that family in 1 year in order to make them financially independent.
Right. And that's exactly, elevate them from the level of poverty to self-sufficiency to wealth. And now they're givers, they're contributors. If you actually give $50, everyone's going to spend that $50, but you did not convert anyone, elevate them from a recipient to a donor. Does that make sense?
Right.
Let's take another example. So, Sister Amina. Okay? Could you guys crack the door a little bit? It's just getting...
You want me to put the AC on?
Yeah, because my asthma is
Sheikh,
flaring
this
up.
sounds so amazing and everything, but I think Islamic infrastructure is so pathetic. Like, I have a little bit of experience.
Not only the
here.
infrastructure, the understanding is pathetic.
Right.
So that's what we need to fix first, and we'll put it.
Yeah.
It's been put to practice, alhamdulillah. I can give you examples, actually, some of these classes, that same lecture, what have emerged from, alhamdulillah. So this example is a real example. All these examples are real, but this is one of my halaqas, this is what they did. So Sister Amina lost her husband in a car accident. So all of a sudden she's a widow, right? So she's lived with 3 kids, right? And she's a school teacher, so she's making enough. But what's really killing her is, no, that mortgage that her husband left her with. So now you can either lose the house, be on the street, or even if you rent, I mean, you're going back to square one. We have to borrow for that money every month. So what do we do? Buy her a house. That's exactly what you did. Buy her a house. And this is exactly what happened. Get her in Zakah 150K. She bought a modest house, and now she's self-sufficient. She doesn't need anyone.
Instead of giving her a monthly check.
Instead of making her go through that humiliation of receiving a check every month. And sorry, this month we're still waiting for the donors from this and that. Just buy her a house. She's done for the rest of her life. She doesn't need anyone. Right?
You're not supposed to be holding people on a lifeline.
Yeah.
So what actually, I'm going to give you the different scholarly opinions in a little bit. Let's say someone who's blind, who cannot work, period, disabled for life. So they said how much we should give him. Said the average longevity, this is how much money you give him actually. Deposit for him in the bank. He's 40, he's going to live, let's say, till 75. You give him the actual living cost for 35 years.
In a lump sum.
Lump sum, but so he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. That is Social Security.
But that also requires people to be
Exactly.
frugal with their money and not waste money and things of that nature too, right?
Right, but this is why you have a ZRS that will monitor this. This is exactly how the government works. This is a government job, supposedly. Communities are taken over because there is not an ideal government that's conducting this. Right? There is no Umar bin Abdul Aziz who's doing this. So what happens then? Scholars said, well, how about if we don't have enough funds? Then it's like you go a year by year. So at the beginning of every zakah year, you give them, this is okay, this is your $50,000 for this year. And every year we reassess how much money we have. Right? But again, I'm talking about the growth, showing you actually how the zakah is growth. Zakah is growth actually, even when you're paying 2.5%. Does that make sense? This woman actually may pay zakah as a matter of fact because she's going to be ahead of her expenditures. And now she's a contributor in zakah as opposed to a permanent recipient for the rest of her life. We had a brother actually who, same thing, was getting subsidized housing from certain entity, but they want to check that he's solid and he has enough credit and. So he said, okay, you pay the down payment, we take over your mortgage. So I said, okay, how much is your down payment? You get it from zakah money, and now whatever he's working is enough for him, and he's paying zakah actually. Why? Because his basic need is covered. Does that make sense? And that goes on to every single example. That when you give, you make that person self-sufficient, and you transform them from a recipient to a giver. And this is, again, why we say growth. Everyone does well in the end. Remember the stimulation that's going to happen. Everyone's spending, money comes back to you at the end of the day. So that is the cause. So, now for those, let's say someone unable to work. We mentioned if it's a permanent disability or permanent inability to work, then these people have to be paid for. I'm so sorry, my asthma is really getting worse. So we either give them like enough for the rest of their lives, or just evaluate every year. Some scholars say 6 months. Well, it depends on how much funds you have, right? So how about some people who are unable to work temporarily? Well, you give them enough till they're through. Someone, let's say they broke their leg, they cannot work. Then you give them for the 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Right? How about someone is unemployed? They just lost their job, they're laid off. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna like az-zakat la tahillu lil-qawi al-muktasib," meaning a person who's healthy and capable of working cannot be given zakat money. Meaning that if he's intentionally doesn't want to work and he's capable of working, there is a job opportunity, but just, I'm not finding that CEO job that's gonna pay me $5 million a year or give me this $1 million bonus a month. I'm not gonna take any job less than that. Well, that person does not deserve this account, right? But if someone who is willing to work, unable to find a job, he can be paid zakah money till he finds a job. And the job that he has to find is suited to his qualifications, right? Like, for example, someone who's an attorney, we don't expect him to go and work as a janitor, right? So it has to meet his qualifications and his status as well. Does that make sense? If can't find him the right job, then can be paid out of the zakah money till they're capable of finding the right job for them. Does that make sense? And again, I'm not focusing on the details on how you give zakah. I'm just focusing about the growth aspect, right? Because we talked about at the end of the day, zakah brings you money. Money goes back to you, and this is what I'm showing you how to create growth in the community at large, at a national or even universal level, by raising the GDP, by raising the level for every person. All right, we talked about these things, and now we're going to talk about the debt, actually. So, what does that mean? Means if someone's in debt, you can pay off his debt out of this account. Simple. How is that going to help with the growth?
He becomes a contributor instead of a receiver.
Well, the first thing we have to understand, these debts, basically, he's really in trouble. Basically, what they call that debt is due now, and if he doesn't pay it, he's in trouble. Then you pay it off for him. This is in simplistic terms. But what scholars extrapolated and said, okay, well, why do people ask for loans normally? Start a job, start a business, right? Or for a need or whatever. We know someone in need, you can pay for that. But how about the business part? Said, okay, instead of, this is our model actually. Alhamdulillah, we were essential in creating this model. Let's say how much you want to start, how much loan you're asking for from the bank in order to start your business. Just give a number.
50,000.
Yeah, 50K. Right?
50 million trillion. Really? How about that? You happy?
So we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna give you a loan from the Zakah money. Instead of making you take it from the bank and we pay it from the bank, we're gonna give you a loan from the Zakah money. You become a business owner. In 1 year, you give Zakah money, and the cycle goes on and on. And what is this called? This is microfinance. That's an Islamic concept. That's not a Western concept. It's ours, and this is how it works. Does that make sense? And where does that money go? Once he gets it, goes back to the ZRS. So he paid the loan back instead of us paying loans for him. Right? Right? He's gonna pay it back, so we did not lose a single penny, and he's gonna be contributor, and he's gonna pay zakah, and it goes on and on.
Do you have this in your shadow?
No, not in shadow, but we have it in our circles.
Circle.
See how brilliant this is? This is not a Western concept. This is a fiqh concept. This is the Islamic concept. This is the zakah concept. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do? That's the growth we're talking about. And everyone benefits. Right? Because next month, imagine like we're having, let's say, if we're just talking about a modest budget, like let's say $100 million, that's very modest for the zakah money, by the way. There are people in Houston, I'm going to tell you, you know how much they pay annually in terms of zakah? $25 million. Alhamdulillah, that's good. So the money is there. It just needs to be utilized in the right way. And stop just giving checks here and there. It has to be studied, it has to be done in the right way. If you do it this way, there's no money spent without really being studied and knowing like the impact of the dollar, right? And what it's gonna do for me in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of the small communities do actually. When they give the loans, you know, even if they don't get it back, they know it's gonna come back. Clear?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the rest of the stuff, I'm really not going to go into too much details. And again, my purpose was not to show you fiqh issues about zakah, how it's spent. Showing you one aspect, how money is collected, how it's distributed, with one goal is to promote the growth and enhance the growth in the community, the society, or at national or even global level. Yes.
Has anyone ever approached you about, I don't know, someone that's interested in the taxation system, how it works here? Because it sounds like this is a universally beneficial system. It could be economic models which prove that this would be beneficial even for the United States of America to use. And why would they not adopt a similar model? So, is it someone who's in the Muslim community that's interested in economics or government or something like that to work with, you know, people in the county system, say for example, for Harris County that adopt a similar model or something like that?
You know, there are a lot of studies have been shown, you know, done to compare tax system to zakah system, for example, like PhDs and all that stuff. When the economic crisis happened a few years ago, actually the French government gave a grant of $10 million to study what they call the Islamic financial system. I don't know what happened with that money. Or I don't know what happened with the study. I lost track. I was interested. Yeah, was it like what, 2009? At 2008 when the big crisis happened, and a year or 2 years people started like, what happened? Why did it happen? But they were not focused on this actually. They were focused on the banking system and the riba-free system and reducing the interest rate. And that's why, just like I told you before, it's not going to work. You really have to have the entire system. You cannot just have a piece of the puzzle and leave, the bigger piece. It starts with the zakah. But when people talk about Islamic finance and Islamic economy, they always talk about banking system. And that's flat out wrong. Because what is the strongest foundation? Now the answer to your question, why is zakah a pillar of the 5 pillars of Islam? Because it is
The basis for the economic model.
it is the basis of the economic system. And now back to what took us to this zakah business, right? It took us why these are 5 pillars of Islam, right? Like zakah, okay, here is $50 for you and be happy for that. That's very insignificant, right? This is a joke. So Allah would just make this zakah part of the zakah so someone felt happy. Oh, and we're helping each other? No. It's much bigger than that, right? It's a huge. That is economy. You're talking about building a state here, right? And that's what we now remember. Talked about it's the shahada, the testimony of faith. It is the salah. It is the zakah and fasting and Hajj pilgrimage. So we say a strong state is built on a strong individual with good faith, a strong, solid, powerful faith with good, strong connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the basis. Then strong economy. These are the basic foundations of the state. And strong social system and spiritual system. Right? It's not just like, okay, Brother Abdul is happy he's got $50 this Eid. No. Right? This is the basic foundation of an economy. How? Based on what we've talked for 2 hours last lecture and this lecture. Every single aspect of Zakah is targeted towards building a strong economy, right? And when people talk about the banking system, has nothing to do with economy. Actually, it's a very secondary element of economy. The economy is not borrowing and lending, right? The economy is building infrastructure and making people work and employment and stimulating and spending, and that's what the Zakah does, right?
Mm-hmm.
We showed how that works in the previous lecture, like the constant stimulus effect of the Zakah. When every day you have someone spending their Zakah and giving it, there is a stimulation, right? Every day there is one person being elevated from poverty level to self-sufficiency to wealth, being elevated from a recipient to a giver, right? This is the growth. This is economy, right? The banking system is a very small and tiny portion of the economic system.
The ZRS is an ideal world, inshallah, right? And one day we'll get there. Today, as we live here, what can we do different? You know, should I be grouping up with a bunch of friends, collecting our zakat together, finding an individual in the local community that is in that predicament, and then assisting that local person? Or do I work with an organization that I know is reputable and does that in another country, right? What is a better spend of my zakat? Is it that individual, me working together here, or is it an organization that I know does that? For there's organizations that do, these microfinancing and getting people like self-sufficient and things of that nature as well, right? At a more global and a national level.
All the above. All the above. I have a group, for example, of brothers in one city in the south, actually. What they did said, okay, what are we interested in? We're going to promote education in this community, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And now every year they pay college tuition for those who are not able to. Alhamdulillah. Every year now, since like 3 years ago after they heard this lecture, this is what they did.
Out of the Zakah money or?
Zakah money. Zakah money.
So in which category would that go into? If you're like building schools out of Zakah money or?
It goes under two. Either under the needy, because that person would want to go to college and they're not affording for it. It can go under fi sabilillah, actually. Fi sabilillah, we explained it before, where it was originally for those who want to go fight for the sake of Allah. And they don't have, or not even they don't have to spend out of their pockets. So we give them money so they spend out of their pockets. But scholars said, fi sabilillah, anything in the struggle for the cause of Allah. And that could be by educating kids, by building schools, by doing this, by even supporting the media to defend Muslims, anything that would defend Muslims and protect them, protect their identity, protect their being, well-being, all that stuff. So that would go under their chair. Yes?
So it seems like from this discussion, the full benefits of Zakah would be had if you have like a centralized system like ZRS that you mentioned.
Yes.
Under a state. So what if states generally also spend on building infrastructure, for example, building roads, etc. So would they use like Zakah money for that, or would it be like an extra tax above zakah money?
That's very good question actually. That sister is very sophisticated, mashallah. Because no, these all
economics
no, these questions actually were hot issues of discussion actually on how we handle this, right? And there are a lot of different opinions on can we spend it on this? Because some people tell you like, look, I have like how many million refugees now on the borders? Like you want me to keep these kids starving and now you want to build a school here? It doesn't make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, bottom line, I don't want to go into too deep, sophisticated scholar, academic like debate. But bottom line, yes, it could be used even for the infrastructure. I'm going to give you one example, actually, just like a shocking example.
Mm-hmm.
Umar bin Abdul Aziz, and we spoke about Umar bin Abdul Aziz. I always love talking about Umar bin Abdul Aziz for many reasons, because he was one of the mujaddid of the Islam, the revivers of the Islam. When he became Khalifa at the 98th of Hijrah, or 99 maybe, the first thing, he reformed the financial system. Because what happened, all the money was going to the royal family, basically. Everyone takes whatever they want. So he stopped all that stuff. And now he focused on the zakah. With the zakah, he gave everyone their needs. And they became self-sufficient. Till people would go after 2 years, like, whoever is in need, come and take zakah money, no one would go. Everyone is self-sufficient.
In 2 years?
In 2 years. It doesn't take much, believe it or not.
That's how long he was.
He was in less than 3 years. In his second year, he said, so what did he start doing with the zakah money? Because there is, what they call it, surplus. There is surplus in the ZRS budget now. So what did he do? He had the oil lamps in the streets. He was the first Khalifa actually to light and illuminate the streets during the night. So people can go to Fajr prayer, Isha prayer without fearing, animals, without falling in the street. That was Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Then they go. then he did for those who are like disabled or handicapped, whatever term you want to use. He had actually one servant serving them during the day and one during the night, paid completely off by the government. That's social security, and that's, when you're talking about home health aid and all that, this is what Umar bin Abdul Aziz did. And then he actually had said, what else can we do? It's like they're trying, what can we do, right? So at one time, there were some women who were unmarried, actually. So, and they were like older, so I said, give him wealth, make him wealthy, so someone would be greedy to marry them for their wealth.
Wow.
Seriously, I mean,
Wow.
You're talking utopias, yes. This is the Islam utopia. It can happen. Subhanallah. And he said, if Allah keeps me alive till this next year, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, he would have built probably, a train rail from Mecca to... Seriously. I mean, this is what would have happened, subhanAllah. I mean, he could have probably had a path from the entire globe coming to Medina and Mecca for the Hujjaj. So yes, these things can happen, but there are priorities again, because scholars have a debate. Okay, so what do we do? Do we have to give the 8 categories at the same time, or do you have to give one at a time? There is a lot of room for, just setting up priorities and trying to see what's best for this. And what could be best for this community may not necessarily be the same thing for Egypt or Pakistan or something. But do know that there is, alhamdulillah, a lot of room for judgment, for reasoning, and doing what's right. So, and this is the beauty. Fiqh zakah is the most beautiful fiqh, actually. I enjoy it in fiqh. Why? So diverse and so practical. This is the nice thing. Like, there's financial problems are real, and the zakah gives you like practical solution for these problems. Does that answer the question? What else? I think I'm going to stop here, inshallah. But if there's any question, I'll take it.
Amongst the categories, is there any distinction between Muslim versus non-Muslim recipients as far as prioritizing?
And family versus non.
That's good. Well, let's start with the easy one first. The sadaqah pays off and better off to be given to those who are close to you. الأقربون أولى بالمعروف, meaning those who are closer to you, in kinship, these are more deserving for the zakah. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you responsible, right? Obviously, you cannot give it to those who you are required to spend on. Like, you don't give zakah to your children or to your parents, right? Because you're, in principle, required to spend on them from your real money, not from the zakah money. But for your relatives, extended family, like cousins, and whatever relatives is better, friends, that stuff. But then as the circle gets bigger, but it's better and it's more rewarding when you give it to those who are closer to you. Now, for Muslims and non-Muslims, same principle applies. You are responsible for those who are closer to you. When the money is done, when there are no Muslims left behind, nor poor people, no widows, no orphans, then you can spend it for the non-Muslims. But you can spend on the non-Muslims from those al-mu'allafati qulubihim, right? Someone who want to entice to Islam, someone who's kind of not sure, you can spend money. Like, a lot of times, you want to invite these who are learning about Islam. It could be a costly thing you want to give them, like gifts, through a party or something. That could be from the zakah money. Same thing. Scholars have talked about, like I said, my purpose was not to discuss these details, but I'm just going to give you an example. Lobbying, for example, could be from under this category from the zakah money. Because there are a lot of these politicians, they are like kind of pro-Muslims. You can pay lobbying money for these people after the zakah money in the interest of Islam, in the interest of Muslims. Right? These are the practical aspects of the zakah. I mean, really we have to widen our horizons. And this is not something like, this is not an innovative thought. It is innovative, but it is original. It's authentic. Right? So, out of this, Umar bin Khattab did pay actually, you remember the story of that Jewish person, who Umar bin Khattab said, "What's wrong with you?" And it's like he was very sick, disabled, and he said, "Umar bin Khattab did not give me enough money to survive." So he asked, "Who is this person?" He said, "Like, this is a Jewish person." So Umar said, "You took his money when he was young, out of jizya, and now you're leaving him alone or leaving him out. That's not right." And he gave him money for the rest of his life. So that's social security. Does it come from the zakah mal or not? It can come from the zakah mal, actually. Anything else?
What's next week? Next 2 weeks, inshallah. After 2 weeks.
Zakah.
We're not done yet, bro.
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to have maybe a comment that, you know, we were talking about sort of modern implementations of Zakah and how maybe Western societies can even see examples. And it just kind of, I don't know too much about it, but it came to my mind the example of Mr. Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Prize in 2006.
In Bangladesh.
And he did this process of microfinancing or giving microcredit. And it was, I guess it was obviously a success, but I guess more recently there was some kind of action to remove him from his position at the bank, which some people speculated that this was political. And so it seems that, you know, there are forces that, you know, sometimes are creating issues to keep us from really reaching that level.
Let's set the record straight down. What's the difference between our microfinance and Muhammad Yunus microfinance?
Interest.
He was charging interest.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
We don't charge interest.
Okay.
And he took that concept from our books. And yet he charged interest. And wasn't cheap either. So, just to set the record straight. A lot of times, you know, we're good, alhamdulillah. Anyone who does good, we want to promote him and give him the due credit. But there's another side of the story. So, just like Abu Hanifa did not charge us for these lectures, by the way. Nor the Shafi'i asked, okay, here's my book, but you have to give me. Yeah, this is the difference, subhanAllah, between Umar bin Abdul Aziz, you know, was barely paid off for his daily food, and he didn't make a huge wealth. This is the irony. Umar bin Abdul Aziz was wealthy, and when he became Khalifa, he gave up all that his wealth. Right? Some people, they were not wealthy, they microfinance and they become wealthy. We don't do that. Yes?
Two more questions there. One, how about spending for masjids to create a masjid? Does that come into like communal societal needs? I guess that comes into infrastructure, so it would be applicable.
Yeah.
Second, are you familiar with ISGH's Zakat model and able to talk about it?
You want me to stop it?
I'm not familiar with the IGH Zakat model. I'm not, truly. So the first question is a very good question. It's a very important question, actually. So people who say that you can pay zakat towards the building a masjid, it can go under fi sabilillah, because they say it is, you know, protecting Muslims and, you know, protecting the identity, the youth, and that's fi sabilillah. This is da'wah, this is jihad, right? But I accept this in someone in Alaska where they're struggling and they've been trying to raise funds for 5 years, and it becomes a huge issue. But this does not fly in a community where you have, you know, wealthy people, 90 physicians and 100 engineers and 100 business owners. No, it's not gonna fly. They need to cough up that money out of their, you know, pockets, and it cannot be zakah money. No, it should not be zakah money. Okay, so, and people ask, oh, can we pay for the maintenance, you know, utilities? No, you can't. It has to come up from the community, and it cannot be the zakah money. Yeah, I understand if someone is struggling, you know, in a student community where everyone is, the whole masjid is surviving on $20 donations from this and there, and yeah, that's understandable if they want to use their zakah money, if they give zakah money. But in a community like Houston, masjid built from zakah money, I don't think so. Yes?
You have spoken of your work. Do you have any publications out that we can probably take on further reading, or anything else that you can recommend on the subject of zakat?
The best zakah book actually written ever in history is the book of Sheikh. That's the best Zakah book written ever in history. It's an encyclopedia, and it's translated. I don't know if it's available or not, honestly. So just look for it. If not, I came across one of the I'll try to look up like it's not exactly structured Zakah book, but it's actually a series of articles comparing Zakah to tax and that stuff. And that guy did a good job. It's not complete, but it has a lot of these things. If someone actually can transcribe, like we agreed these things, I can actually put them, inshallah, in a series of articles, you know, and put them out to be published, inshallah. Yes, the last two questions.
Yes, I have two questions.
I knew it, see? I picked the right person.
Yeah, so I know you talked about, you touched about students getting paid, but I was wondering if perhaps you speak specifically about the context of student loans in this country, exactly the way people go about it, because I know it's going to be much more controversial.
Okay.
And secondly, you gave an example of, okay, actually the punishment for whosoever gets who doesn't pay Zakah. I think, can you like elaborate on it, especially with respect to one of the hadith where the Prophet told his companions never to collect Zakah from that particular guy because he stopped coming to pray in the mosque for a while. I mean, after he got rich enough, stuff like that. So can you elaborate?
Okay. So let's start with the easier one. So that story of Tha'laba ibn Hatib, the one who was called the bird of the masjid, right? That's in Surah At-Tawbah, who kind of gave a pledge, if Allah made me wealthy, I'm going to give zakah. That's actually not very solid story. So wipe it out of your brain. So it's not a sound narration. It's general that a lot of people, they promise when I get wealthy, I'm going to give back. They become wealthy and they forget about Allah and forget. This is what the ayahs talk about, right? Because like now, that person came to give the zakah and it wasn't accepted, implies that how is Allah going to, Allah promised He's going to accept the tawbah and now He's not accepting the tawbah? There's an issue with that. So that hadith is, that story is, I know it's a very interesting story.
Is it weak or is it fabricated? Which one?
It's very weak,
okay.
Very, very low level. Okay. I used to enjoy the story when I was a kid. But this is a very, very appealing story and very common stories for those who do fundraisings. Right? They kind of intimidate you and make you feel guilty and bad. You better give. No, seriously. So that's why every khutbah, they mention this story, there is a fundraising afterward. The funny thing, I'm going to give you this story. So, I prayed in Brooklyn, we used to have a small conference, and I visited one of the brothers there. So we go there and they had a mufti of a certain country visiting, at that particular masjid. And he mentioned that story and there was a fundraising. So in the following year, same time, we went for this, it's a regular thing. The same mufti came in and we didn't pay attention. He gave the same khutbah and there was a fundraising. So one of the guys said, it's like deja vu. The same thing happened last year. Told him, no, you're just hallucinating. It was true, actually, that it's the same mufti, the same sheikh, same story, same fundraising, because they used to do fundraising for a local school, a Muslim school. So, anyway. So what was the question now?
The second question is regarding the student loans.
Student loan. All the loans from, the in the conventional banking system, obviously they're not allowed. They're haram, whether it's mortgage or finance or student loan. But it's allowed if it's a necessity and there is no other means for it. Meaning you don't have any other choice. There is no one is going to give you that money and you have to go to college, then it is okay.
How about the issue of using the Zakah money to pay the students who are strangled in such?
Yes, it is okay. It is halal. It is permissible. Easy and simple. Any other questions? I will stop here, inshallah. What's this? Are we meeting in 2 weeks or is it going to be off? What's the status?
It's some holidays. What do you think?
I think we'll see you next year, inshallah.